How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Mem Vav, Daf 46 of Masechta Kiddushin. Friends, let me tell you, Daf 46, I don't know what to tell you about Daf 46. There's something funny about this Daf. I'll tell you there's something funny about this Daf. The first quarter of the Daf, I forgot to prepare it. I just push it. It fell through the cracks. I looked at it today, said this doesn't look familiar. And I guess I must have thought that I had done it the day before, but I didn't. So I had to learn it just now. And when I was reviewing, I was actually learning. And then, so that's the first part, and then the rest of it gets a little complicated. Anyways, friends, this is some daf. I'll tell you, it's some daf, but okay. We learn every daf in Shas. That's what we do around here, including this one. So here we go. Alright, so we're going to start on Daf Mem Vav Amud Aleph, third line of the Daf by the two dots. Itmar ustedi ketana sheniskacha shelo das avio. So if you have a ketana who was betrothed shelo das avio, without her father's knowledge, fine. Amar Rav, says Rav, ben hi uven avio yicholin la'akev. So she accepted kesef. She's a ketana. She accepted kesef Kiddushin from some fellow without consulting with her father. So now, of course, her father can say, hey, no, I'm not okay with this. But the Chiddush of Rav is that even she can also actually, as long as her father has not yet consented, so she can also change her mind at that point. Ravasi Omar Avia Velohi, whereas Ravasi says, no, only her father would be able to disapprove. Once she, however, accepts the Kesef Kiddushin, she's already accepted it. Her father could still say no, but she can't. Eisvei Rav Huna Rav Asi, V'amila Chia Barav Rav Asi. So they ask a kasha on Rav Asi. The pasuk says by mefate, if a fellow is seduces a fella and she's a naira or a ktana, imayin yimayin avia. So let's actually read these two psukim in a row. It says v'chiyifata ish besula shelo rasa. If a fellow is mefata a besula who's not engaged. V'shachav ish ima, and he sleeps with her. Mar yimarena lo leisha, so he has to marry her. Imayin yimayin avia. But if her father refuses to allow her to be married to this fellow, l'sitelo kesef yishchol kamor besula, so then he receives money. So it says, so imayin yimayin avia. So it says if the father objects to this fellow marrying his daughter, ein li elo avia. All I know is that the father can object. Hi atzma minayin. How do I know that she can also object? So Tamilomer imayin yimayin mikomakum. If he shall surely refuse, and the double lashon comes to include even that she can refuse as well. So that is Rav Asi. So that's the kasha on against Rav Asi, right? Because Rav Asi said that only the father can refuse by ketana sheniskacha shelo das avia. But Rav Huna, some say Chia Barav, ask against Rav Asi. But what about this pasuk that say it's not just the father, but the daughter can also refuse? Amar Lahu Rav responds to them, I guess to Rav Huna or Chia Barav, or maybe both of them. I don't know. Lo tizlu bas ipcha. Don't get all excited about nothing. Meaning, Rav had said that either the father or the daughter can reject. Rav Asi had said only the father, not the daughter. Rav Huna, I guess, and or Chia Barav came to support Rav, and from a pasuk, Rav says, hey, people, I know you're trying to support me, but don't get carried away over there. That Rav Asi would be able to answer to you, that you're bringing a raya from a pasuk when it comes to mefate. That pasuk could be talking about that if he was mifater, he seduced her without the intention of kiddushin, and therefore it's not right. We are discussing the sugya of ketana sheniskacha shelo das avia, but maybe by the pasuk of mifata is talking about something else. It's talking about when he seduced her without the intention of marriage. Pita shelo l'shum kiddushin shelo l'shum ishus krabai. Do I need a pasuk to teach me that if a fellow seduces a girl without the intention of marriage, that she can say that she's not interested? Why I need a pasuk to teach me that? Obviously, either the father or her could say that they are not interested. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak lo mishalim knas kimefuta. Rav Nachman Yitzchak says yes, but the point where the pasuk is needed is to teach that the fellow would have to pay the fine, like a mefuta, right? Meaning if you have a fellow, we can say it's talking about where he seduced her without the intention of Kiddushin, and we're saying that if either the father or the daughter reject the option to get married, so then they don't get married, and he would have to pay a fine. Whether it's the father or the daughter rejected, he'd have to pay the fine. So it's obviously not needed to teach that she doesn't have to get married, that she could reject that marriage. What it is needed is to teach that even if she's the one who rejects it, still he would pay the fine. Amalei Rav Yosef. So now Rav Yosef says to Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok, if this is so Hainu D'Tanina, this is that we teach in a Mishnah, Mario Marena Lo Leisha, that when the pasuk says that if he's mefata this girl, he seduces this girl. So the first pasuk says Mario Marena Lo Leisha, they should get married. So shetzricha emenu kiddushin, that right. So Mario Marena Lo Leisha shetzricha emenu kiddushin, that he would have to give her kiddushin. And if the pasuk was talking about where he was mefata, he seduced her with the intention of marriage, then why would he have to give separate kiddushin? So rather, Rav Yosef wants to argue that this supports what we have been saying, that the pasuk is talking about if he seduces her without the intention of marriage, and that is why if they then want to get married, so then he has to give separate kiddushin. Amalei Abaye says to Rav Yosef, tzricha kiddushin l'das avia. Abaye says it's not necessarily a proof. You could theoretically argue that he was mefata l'shem kiddushin, but he would still have kiddushin, but he would still have to give her a kiddushin, with the intention of the father, right? Meaning if he seduces her with the intention of kiddushin, the father still has to agree to allow him to marry his daughter, and then he would have to give kiddushin again. Nonetheless, this time with the intention of the father, with the consent of the father. Okay, fine, very good. Okay, so that was the case of so if you have a Kiddushin iskacha shlola da'asavia, so Rav had said that either the father or her can reject the marriage. I mean, even after she accepts it, she could still change her mind so long as her father has not consented. Whereas Rav Asi says no, only the father can do that. The daughter cannot. Okay, now we get to a new Mishnah that we actually referenced the other day. It gets a little bit technical, I'll tell you. This Mishnah gets a shtickle technical, I'll tell you. This Mishnah gets a shtickle technical. Omer le'isha, says the Mishnah that a fellow says to a fella, his kadshi li b'tmarazo, his kadshi bazo. If he says, be betrothed to me with this, what time is it? It shouldn't be too late. Ooh. Alright. What do you want me to tell you? It's a little late. What do you want me to tell you? It's a little late. What do you want me to tell you? Ha'omer le'isha, a fellow says to a fella, his kadshi li b'tmarazo, his kadshi li bazo, be mikudeshes to me with this date. Be mikudeshes to me with this date. So Hidavka mentions Kiddushin twice. So because he had mentioned Kiddushin twice, right? His kad shili b'tmarzo, his kad shili bazo, he mentions Kiddushin twice, so then one of those dates are going to have to be a shavapruta in order for this Kiddushin to work. However, and if neither of them are a shavapruta, even if together they're worth a shavapruta, but separately they're not worth a shavapruta, so then it would not work. Bazo, vazo, vazo, im yesh shavapruta bechulon mikudeshes. But if he doesn't say Kiddushin multiple times, if he says mikudeshes to me with this, this, and this, but he only mentions Kiddushin once, so then, as long as in total there is a pruta, so then she is mikudeshes. Even if in none of the dates individually there is a shavapruta, but if in total there is a shavapruta, so then mikudeshes. Fine. And if in total there is not a shavapruta, so then she is not mikudeshes. ocheles rishona. If as she received the dates, she ate them, Eina mikudeshes ache ba'achas men shavapruta, then she's only mikudeshes if in one of them there was a shavapruta, and the Gemara is going to ask what is the context for this. But we're saying that if as she receives them, she eats them, then she's only mikudeshes if in one of them there's a shavapruta, and the Gemara is going to explain what it's talking about. Says the Gemara, Mantana is kachi. We saw this the other day. Who is the Tana who says that if he says his kadshi multiple times, so then we treat them as separate givings of Kiddushin, and therefore they would have to each be, right, we can't join them together for the shavapruta. There would have to be a shavapruta in one of them individually. Rab Shimoni. Rabbi says it's Taka Reb Shimon, that if you have multiple people who claim that they're owed deposits by a certain fellow, and he says, I swear to you, I swear to you, I swear to you, I swear to you, he swears to each of them separately. So then, if he's lying, he would have to bring a korban shvuas apikadon, and if he said shvua separately for each claim, so then he would have to bring multiple korbanos. But if he only said shvua for you and you and you and you, so then he would only have to bring one korban. Okay, so just like Reb Shimon it depends on how many times he says shvuah. Here also, it depends on how many times he says kiddushin. Okay, fine. Bazo im yesh b'chulin shavapruta v'chuli. So we said that if he says but iskachli bazo, so then we can add them all up cumulatively to see if they equal a shavapruta. And then we had said, and this is what the Gemara is going on, that if as she receives them, she eats them, so then one of them would have to be a shavapruta in order for the Kiddushin to work. In fact, the Gemara aheya. What is that statement going on? Is it going on the Reisha of the Mishnah, or sort of the middle case of the Mishnah, the next case of the Mishnah? Is it talking about the first case of the Mishnah when he says hiskachili bazo, or is it going on the second case in the Mishnah where he says hiskachili bazo uvazo, and then we're talking about if she eats it? I think I have to sneeze. One sec. Yeah, my hunch was a correct hunch. Okay, so now, if we're saying it's talking about the Reisha, where he says, here are these two dates, iskachili bazo, and we say that each one individually would have to be a shavapruta. If neither one is a shavapruta, it doesn't work. My irya ocheles. So, what, who cares if she's eating it or not? Afilu manachas nami. Even if they're just sitting there, forget about whether she's eating them and they don't exist anymore. Even if they're just sitting there, there would have to be a shavapruta in one of them. Iskachili bazo ka'amar. He says, he's saying iskachili bazo, and therefore one of them would have to be a shavapruta, even if they were just sitting there, let alone if she's like eating them. So ela aseifa. So rather it's talking about the seifa, where he says iskachili bazo, right? Be mikudeshes to me with these dates. And with this date, and in that case, we said that if they all cumulatively are equal to a shavapruta, then that would work, even if none of them individually are with a shavapruta. And what we're saying now is that, but if as she receives them, she's eating them, so then one of them would have to be a shavapruta. But now, for the Gemara, va'afilu bekamaisa, even if it was the first one that was a shavapruta, right? So it says iskachili bazo, uvazo, and and then he gives her one, then he gives her the second one, then he gives her the third one, and as she receives them, she eats them. And we're saying even if the first one, numbers 2 and 3 were not a shavapruta, but the first one was a shavapruta, and we're saying as long as one of them, even the first one, was a shavapruta, she's mikudeshes. V'ha milvehi, but it's a loan. And you can't be mikudeshes with a loan. What does that mean? It means that when he says his kachili bazo, uvazo, and he gives her one, and then he gives her the next one, and then he gives her the third one, his intention for the kiddushin is not complete until he gives her all 3 of the dates. Which means that when she receives just the first one, it's not yet kiddushin, because his intention for the Kiddushin was that she should receive all three of them. So when she receives the first one, it's not Kiddushin yet, because his intention is not complete. It's Be'etzim alone. He's Be'etzim giving her the date to hold on to until she receives the other two, at which point it'll be Mekadesh her with those, so it's Be'etzim alone. And if we're saying that if the first one is worth a Shavet Pruta, and she eats it, and we're saying that that is the one that she's being Mikudeshes with, well then, you can't be Miskadeshes with alone, right? If I give you, if a fellow gives a fella $100 as a loan, and then the next day he says, you know what, forget about it, don't pay me back, keep the loan, I'm waiving the loan, and use that, and that'll be Kesef Kiddushin. It doesn't work. You can't Mekadesh b'milveh ain't Mekudeshes. You cannot be Mekadesh b'milveh. So therefore, if what he's saying is be Mekudeshes to me with this date and this date and this date, and then he gives her one, then the second, then the third, until she receives the third date, the first two are just considered a loan. And how could she be Mekudeshes with that first date if it was only considered a loan at the time until she received all three of them? So Amr Rabbi Yechanan arei shulchan v'arei basar v'arei sakin ve'ein lanu pelecho. So says Rabbi Yechanan, it's pashut a quandary. We have a table, we have meat, we have a knife, but we don't have a mouth to eat with. Pashut, we have a beautiful Mishnah over here, but we don't know how to understand it. Rav Shmuel Amr Tarav, so Rav and Shmuel both say L'olma Reisha. So really it's referring to the Reisha actually. The first part of the Mishnah had said that if a fellow says Hiskachili Bazo, so then one of them would have to have a Shavar Puta in order for them to be married. And then what the Mishnah is saying is that if she eats them, so then still there would need to be a Shavet Pruta in order for the marriage to work. And the Chiddush is V'lo miboya ka'amar. Lo miboya manachas the Ika Shavet Pruta in ilolo. That certainly if he says Hiskachili Bazo, one of them is going to have a Shavar Puta, that's for sure. But I may have thought, Aval Ocheles, but maybe if as she receives them, she eats them, and also since she's getting benefit from it, maybe she is, right, she's eating these dates, and maybe she's saying, wow, this is Gevaldig, and she would be willing to be Miskadeshes even with less than a Shavar Puta. I mean, if it just says Hiskachili Bazo, okay, so one of them would have to have a Shavar Puta. But I might have a minute to say that if he gives her one, and it's less than a Shavar Puta, but she eats it, and she gets benefit from it, maybe what she's saying is, yes, of course, I'm into this, I'm being Miskadeshes with this date, even if it's less than a Shavar Puta. So I might think that works. Kamash Malan, that no, even if she eats it, it would stand, she sort of demonstrates that she's getting benefit from these dates, and you might think that she's being miskadeshes with these dates. No, it needs to be a Shavar Pruta nonetheless. That is Rav and Shmuel's opinion. Reb Ami Omar says, Reb Ami le'olam ha-seifa, that no, it's really referring to the seifa. That when he says it's kachli bazo, and we said that in that case, if cumulatively they are worth a Shavar Pruta, so then she's mikudeshes. But if she eats them, so then one of them individually would have to be worth a Shavar Pruta. Umay ad she'eba achas mein Shavar Pruta. And what does it mean until one of them is a Shavar Pruta? Ad she'eba achrona Shavar Pruta. The last one would have to be a Shavar Pruta. Because yes, the first two, if there are three of them, the first two are loans. And she can't be miskadeshes with a loan. So those can't, even if they're a Shavar Pruta, those can't work for the Kiddushin. Because you said that they're a loan until she receives all three of them. But if the last one, which upon receipt, when she receives it, she's receiving all of the dates, which is what this fellow intended to do, and if that last one is a Shavar Pruta, so then she will be Mikudeshes. Omar Ravish Mamina Midrab Ami Tlos. Rav says that we learn three things from Rab Ami. Shmamina Mekadesh b'milveh einu Mikudeshes. Okay, we learn that if you're Mekadesh b'milveh einu Mikudeshes, because we had said that how could it be that if the first one is where, right, in the Seifa, when he says, Iskachli bazo, vazo, vazo. So the first ones are loans. And we said, how could it be that if the first one is a Shava Pruta, she's Mikudeshes? That first date is a loan. Implying that Amakadesh b'milva ain't Mikudeshes. You can't be Mikudeshes with a loan. Vishmamina Amakadesh b'milva ufruta daita pruta. And it also teaches that if a fellow is Mekadesh with a loan, but also separately with a pruta, so the intention is for the pruta, and of course, being Mekadesh with a Shava Pruta works. And so if he is Mekadesh with a loan and with the pruta, we assume that the intention is not on the loan, which would be a problem, but rather the intention is on the pruta. Here also, right? He gave 3 dates, one at a time. The first 2 are loans. The third one is Kiddushin, is a Shava Pruta. So we say, Mekadesh b'milve upruta daito a pruta. So the intention is for the pruta, not for the first 2 that are loans. And finally, Vishmamina Mauz Ba'al Mechozim. This one I can't say 1,000% that I understand, but I'll explain it how I understand it, which is that if a fellow gives Kesef Kiddushin, but it doesn't end up working for Kesef Kiddushin, so then it's not a gift. It has to go back. And the fact that we said that those first 2 dates are considered like a loan means that there are things that are going to have to go back. So even though those aren't being used for Kiddushin, the last one is the one that's being used for Kiddushin. The first ones are considered a loan, but if he gives money for Kiddushin, it doesn't end up getting used for Kiddushin, they are things that would have to go back. Okay, fine. So now says the Gemara Itmar, whose Pashut stated, HaMekadesh Achosu, a fellow's Mekadesh his sister. Very beautiful. Rav Omer Mos Chozim. Rav says that the money goes back. She's got to give the money back. It's okay. Shmuel Amar Mos Matono, where Shmuel says that the money is a gift. She can keep the money. Whereas Mekadesha with money, Rav says she's got to give back the money, at least eventually. Shmuel says it's a gift. Rav Amar Mos Chozim, Rav says that she's got to give the money back to him. Adam Yodeya she'en Kiddushin tfusim ba'achos. So of course a person knows that he can't be Mekadesh's sister, right? We learned the other day, Emer lechochma achosiat. Say to wisdom that you are like my sister, that just like it's obvious to a fellow that his sister is asura to him. Also, that's how obvious, that's how at the tip of your tongue wisdom should be, and readily available wisdom should be. But we see that, right? It's quite obvious to all that a fellow's sister is forbidden to him. So really, what he was giving her the money for was not for Kiddushin, but rather as a deposit that she will at a later point give back. So why doesn't he just say it's a pikadon? What, he thinks it's funny to say that it's Kiddushin? So Sover lo mekabla. Well, he thought that if he gives it to her as a deposit, maybe she won't feel comfortable, she won't accept it, so he gives it to her as Kiddushin. Then she'll accept it. Alright, interesting. Shmuel Sover Maus Matano. Shmuel says that the money is a gift. Because the fellow knows that, of course, Kiddushin doesn't work with his sister. So why is he really giving it? He's giving it as a gift. Why doesn't he just say, I'm giving you a gift? You think he's being funny? So, Savar Ksifa La Milsa. Well, he thought maybe she would be embarrassed to receive a gift, so if he says Kiddushin, then that wouldn't be embarrassing. So that's why he did it. Okay. So we see, so the Gemara is now going to ask a kasha on Shmuel. So now we see that if a fellow is Mekadesh his wife, his sister, something that is obviously not relevant. So Rav says that she's got to give the money back. Shmuel says that she can keep the money, it's a gift. So, Mosiv Ravina Baravina asks a kasha. Hamafish chalaso kemach. If a fellow separates challah when it's still flour. Now, you don't separate challah when it's flour. You separate challah, I believe it's 1/40th. You separate it when it is already dough. You don't separate it when it is flour. If a fellow separated challah when it was flour, Eino challah, it's not challah. The gezel biad koyin, and it is theft in the hands of the koyin. The koyin needs to give it back to the fellow. Okay, we have the fellow who separated the challah, and then you have the koyin. So the koyin needs to give it back to the fellow. Now the kasha is, according to Shmuel, why should the koyin have to give back this flour to the fellow? Ve'amai. gezel biyad kohen. Why is it theft in the hand of the kohen? Why does the kohen have to give it back to the fellow? Nema, why don't we say Adam yodeya she'en mafrishim challah kemach, that everybody knows that you don't separate challah from flour, you separate challah from dough. V'nosun l'shem matana, and he gave it as a gift. That's the shaila, right? Just like Shmuel says that everybody knows you can't be mekadesh your sister, therefore he gave the money as a gift. So here also everybody knows that you don't separate challah from flour. So he was giving it to the kohen as a gift. So why does the kohen have to give it back? Why can't he keep it? So and for the Gemara shiny awesome. Dinafik churva mine. It's different when it comes to the challah. Meaning says Shmuel, look, in theory, the kohen should be able to keep it. Because you're right. Because you're right. Because you're right. People know that you don't separate challah from flour, and therefore he was giving it as a gift. But the problem is that some bad outcomes can happen if we allow the kohen to keep it. What's the bad outcomes? Zimnin de isle le kohen pachus michomesh rivoyim kemach. The minimum shear of challah. This is where Rashi really goes to town. But I don't think that you need to really go to town over here in order to understand the Gemara. That a fellow might have less than 5 quarter kavs of flour, i.e., he might not have. But that's the minimum amount to be obligated in challah. So it could be that there will be situations where the fellow, where the kohen does not have enough flour for the dough that ensues to be chayiv in challah. V'hai, and he also has this flour that he received, that of course he knows is not, I'm sorry, the flour that he received, and he's going to figure that, okay, well, this has already been separated as challah, so it's not going to be chayiv in challah again, and by adding it to my flour, which, right, the current flour that I have is not enough to be chayiv in challah. Now I have this flour that this guy gave me. Interesting. Okay, anyways, sorry, got distracted. But now I have this additional flour that this guy gave me, and now I do have enough of a shear that would be chayiv in challah. The thing is that this was already separated as challah, so it's not actually chayiv in challah, so it's not going to make any difference in the flour and in the ensuing dough. And therefore, he's going to end up not separating challah from the ensuing dough, even though he needed to, and that'll be a problem. The alish le bahade adadin is going to knead together all of this dough, the initial, all the flour, right? Or the initial flour he had plus the flour that he received from the fellow. V'kasavar niskina isaso, and he's going to think, well, this dough is fine; it doesn't need to separate challah. V'asi lemeichla betivla, and he's going to eat tevel. And therefore, in order to avoid this outcome, we say that the kohen needs to return the flour to the fellow. But I thought we said that everybody knows that you don't separate challah from flour. So the kohen knows this. Why would it enter his mind that, why would he think that the flour that was given to him was actually challah and that it shouldn't affect his flour? Yodea ve'eno yodea. Well, he knows and he doesn't know. Yodea she'en mafrishim challah kemach. Look, okay, yeah, everybody knows, including the kohen, that you don't separate flour from, don't separate challah from flour. You separate challah from dough. But ve'eno yodea, but where the kohen gets tricked up, what he doesn't know is the sover time mayumai mishum tircha de kohen. Well, why don't you separate challah from flour? Well, out of concern for the tircha of the kohen. What? You think the kohen just wants to receive raw ingredients? He wants to receive dough. He wants to receive something he can do something with. So that's why you don't separate challah from flour. V'tircha the kohen achilte. But the kohen saying, look, I don't really care. It's fine. And therefore he's going to think that this flour is not actually chayiv in challah, and then when he's going to mix it together into the with his flour, it's going to create dough that really is going to be chayiv in challah, but he's going to think that it isn't. Okay, so that is the problem, because the kohen is going to get mixed up. So therefore we say just give it back to the fellow. But v'tehave truma v'losochal achiyotzi alei challah makmacher. But still, why is the gezerah that he needs to give back the flour to the fellow? Why can't they just say, instead of, right, meaning we're saying in this case he needs to give the flour back. Why don't they just say, in this case he needs to separate challah from the dough? Milotnan, after all, do we not have a Mishnah? One second, let me just, wait, one second, I want to see something. Wait, one second. Okay, fine. Okay, whatever. Milotnan, after all, don't we learn in the Mishnah? Mina nakuv al she'eno nakuv, that if a fellow, right, so otzitz nakuv and otzitz she'eno nakuv, right? If you have an otzitz nakuv, a pot with a hole in the bottom, so that's chayiv in truma mida oraisa. A pot that does not have a hole in it at all, so all the dirt is not connected to the ground whatsoever, and the roots aren't connected to the ground whatsoever. It's entirely in a pot, and there's no holes in the pot. So then, is midoraisa, it is not chayiv in truma, only midorabanon it's chayiv in truma. So now, if a fellow has a pot without any holes in it, so it's potter mitruma midoraisa, and then he needs to separate, but he's midorabanon, he's separating truma, and then, but he's not separating truma from the pot without the holes. He decides he's going to separate from the stuff from the pot with the holes, i.e. the stuff that's chayiv midoraisa. He's going to use that to be poter the tevel from the pot without the holes. That's only chayiv midorabanan. Now that isn't anything at all, because the pot midoraisa, the pot without the holes, is not chayiv in truma at all. So he's separating this truma that really midoraisa is nothing, and what he's giving to the kohen is really just tevel. It's not truma. So what he's giving to the kohen is tevel from a pot with holes in it that's chayiv in truma midoraisa, and he gives it to the kohen. So what do we say in that case? We don't say that the kohen needs to give it back to the fellow. So truma v'lo sochat sheyotze le'at truma ma'aser b'makom acher. We just say that the kohen just needs to separate truma. We don't say the kohen needs to give it back. We just say, okay, so just separate truma now. Yet over here by the flour, we're saying, we don't just say, okay, so just separate challah. We say, no, give it back. How come? And for the Gemara, betray money, tzoyis b'chad money lo tzoyis. The answer is because with, something in two pots, okay, a person listens, right? Meaning, you have one pot that's an otzitz nakuv, you have another pot that's an otzitz she'enu nakuv. We say, look, there's a difference between these two pots. The truma didn't work. You have to separate your own truma. He says, okay, I see. They're two different things. Okay, I get it. But over here, it's all just one flour. And because it's all just one flour, the distinction is less easily understood. And he's saying, you're telling him, no, it's not good challah. You're now going to have to separate it now that it's dough. And it's a less understood concept. And therefore, he's not going to separate it on his own. Therefore, he has to give it back. Okay, fine. Alternatively, L'olam kohen meitzis tzayis. Or you could say, look, alternatively, we're not concerned about the kohen at all. Theoretically, the kohen could separate his own challah and it will be fine. We're not concerned about the kohen. You know what we're concerned about? The fellow. V'kasavar balabayis niskina yisasu, because the fellow is going to say, okay, well, I gave the flour to the kohen. I've separated my challah, and he's now going to make bread with the remaining flour and think that he's already separated challah and that it's okay, but really he's going to be eating tevel. The meichel betivli is going to be eating tevel. But I thought we said that everybody knows that you don't separate challah from flour, you separate challah from dough. Look, the people know, but they also don't know. Okay, he knows that you don't separate challah from flour, but ve'enu yodeya desaver taima mai, because he figures, yeah, but how come? What's the reason why you don't separate challah from flour? Mishum tircha de kohen, because of the tircha of the kohen. Right now, the kohen is going to have to just get raw ingredients. It's not nice, but tircha de kohen kibla ale. But clearly, the kohen was okay with it, and therefore it is good challah. V'tahavit period. And therefore, this fellow is going to think that, look, the kohen seems to be okay with it. I just gave him challah. I'm going to now make bread with the rest of the flour. and that's going to be a problem. So therefore, the kohen needs to give it back to him to make it, to make it clear. Look, this is not good challah. I can't keep it. I need to give it back to you. You're going to have to make it into dough and then separate it. V'tiave truma v'yachzor v'yitrom. But still, why does the outcome need to be that the kohen needs to return the flour? Why can't the kohen keep the flour? And why don't we say that the fellow just needs to now make dough and separate challah from the dough? Milotnan, after all, don't we learn in the Mishnah, mishe'eno nakuv ala nakuv, that if a fellow separates truma from an otzet she'eno nakuv, which is potter from truma midoraisa, and he separates from the otzet she'eno nakuv as truma for the otzet nakuv, which is chayv midoraisa, and then he gives the truma that he separated from the otzet she'eno nakuv, he gives that to the kohen. Now what he's left with is the otzet nakuv, right? The pot with the hole in it that's chayv midoraisa. So what do we say? We don't say that the kohen needs to give back the truma from the otzitz she'eno nakuv. Rather, milotna mishe'eno nakuv ala nakuv truma v'yachzor v'yitrom. But the fellow just needs to go back and separate the truma nachamo. He's left with the otzitz nakuv, which is chayv and truma midoraisa. And when he separated the truma from the otzitz she'eno nakuv, that doesn't work because it's not chayv and truma midoraisa. So we don't say that he needs to get back the truma from the kohen. We just say, okay, just go ahead now and separate truma from the otzitz nakuv. So why don't we say the same thing? Same thing here. Why do we say that the kohen needs to give back the flour, needs to give back the challah, the quote unquote challah? Why does he have to give it back? Why don't we just say that the fellow should just make a dough and separate challah from that now? Ha'ukimna b'trei monei tzois b'chad mana lo tzois. Well, because we said that while with the otzitz nakuv and the otzitz she'eno nakuv, they are two separate pots, and he can understand why there are differences between them, and he has to go back and separate truma. That's not as readily understood when it's all just, we're just talking about one pile of flour over here, therefore the kohen needs to give it back to him. V'lo tzais, is that really true? That a fellow won't listen when it's just one pile? We learn in the Mishnah, if a fellow is separating truma from cucumbers, it turns out what he separated was bitter, was no good. He's separating truma from melons, and turns out what he separated was not good. It was like spoiled melon. Truma, it's technically truma, but v'yachzor v'yitrom, but he should nonetheless separate a second time from the better stuff. So we see there, even though it's all one, we're just talking about one pile, a big pile of cucumbers, a big pile of melons, and we're just saying, yeah, just go back and do it again, and there's no two separate things there. So shiny awesome, but that's different to mido oraisa. Truma ma'ali mido oraisa, it's good truma. Because mid Rabbi Loi, the Rabbi Loi, mirayin the mina roa la yafesh truma so truma. How do we know that technically speaking, if a fellow separates truma from the bad stuff, and that's what he separates as truma, and he keeps all the good stuff for himself? So how do we know that technically it's truma? Shenemar, as the Bible says, v'lotisu alav chet barimchem eschelbo, that you won't be sinning if you separate from the good stuff, implying that if you separate from the bad stuff, you'll be sinning. Now, if by separating from the bad stuff, it isn't actually truma and it actually doesn't make a difference, then why would he be sinning? So we see that no, if you separate from the bad stuff, it is truma, but it's not nice to do that, and therefore you'll be sinning by being a shtickle nudnik. Friends, that was daf memvav of Masechta Kiddushin. Very, very kind of, funny daf, because again, the first part I forgot to prepare initially. That was talking about a katana who we say that Rav says that either the father or her can reject it. Ravasi says only the father can reject it. Then we get to this new Mishnah which talked about if a fellow says it's kachi li bazos, and then one of them would have to have a shavar puta, but he says it's kachi bazo, then cumulatively they would be a shavar puta if she was eating them as she went. So then Rav and Shmuel say that is talking about when he says it's kachi li bazo, even though she's eating it and displaying that she's accepting it, still it would have to be a shavar puta. Ravasi says it's talking about the sefer where he says it's kachi bazo, and he's saying that the last one would have to be a shavar puta, but the first ones would, right? Those would not work because those are a milvan. You can't be mekadesh with a milva. Right, so we learned that Makadesh but milva doesn't work, and milva upruta, daita upruta. We also then learned out that if you're Makadesh with money that doesn't end up getting used, then it has to be returned. It's not given as a gift. And then we saw machlokas between Rav and Shmuel about a fellow who's Makadesh's sister. So Rav says she's got to give the money back eventually. Shmuel says it's a gift to her. Then we asked some kashas based on challah, which got a little bit technical. Friends, that was Daf Mem Vav. Masechta Kiddushin. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.